This will be part 2 of 3 of the interview with Jenny Singleton. Again, I apologize for the audio issues. Learning is a work in progress. But again, this is part 2 of 3 interview with Jenny Singleton, a survivor of Hephzibah House. Okay, so we're going to...
You hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Sorry, I was clicking something and my brain wasn't working. So we're going to start back up again. Let's continue on about your with your parents. Their marriage was not good, and you had said something in the previous session that your mom had lots of boyfriends over, lots of men over.
Well, not lots. There was 1 or 2 guys that were always around in my childhood, and I never really knew what was up with it. I didn't really understand these 2 guys that were involved in her life and what their relationship was. It was very confusing to me.
So there was no stability.
Yeah, I don't know if they were boyfriends or if they were just friends. To this day, I really don't know. But really, I wanted to go to public school very, very, very desperately. I wanted to get out. I didn't feel I was getting a good education at home.
So you were being homeschooled in a chaotic situation.
I was being homeschooled, and and we had and there was a lot of kids, so my oldest brother wasn't homeschooled. He was never homeschooled. He was kind of my mom's best friend, in a way. Even to this day, they're very extremely close, and she just backs him up and supports him 100%. I've never really fully understood that relationship, but she's always had a deep relationship with him, unlike any of the rest of the siblings. So anyway, yeah, that's the stuff that I guess caused me to go to Hephzibah House, because they felt like they couldn't control me and they couldn't control what I was saying. And I guess I was the one who outed the family, that we weren't a perfect family. And
so knowing what I know
and they
about
had
your
to do something.
situation in previous conversations with you over time. So your mom and dad had a horrible marriage. There was different guys hanging around. There was no stability. You were being homeschooled with a poor education, large family, multiple siblings, and you were being molested by your oldest brother.
Yeah, that about sums it up.
Who happens to be a best friend of your mom.
Right.
And so you were being sexually assaulted by your brother who was closer to your mom than your dad was. He will not confirm nor deny. He just plays dumb.
Right.
And your dad was not strong enough or brave enough to stand up to your mom or stand up to my dad. And rather than acknowledge that you were a sexual abuse victim and you needed serious help, they decided to lock you up in a reform school and try to break you and turn you into a puppet that they could control.
Exactly. Very good. You got that dead on.
Okay. I want to make sure we're on the same page here. So when my dad says these girls were not brought to Hephzibah House because they were singing too loud in the choir, they were brought here because they were, going to be going to prison, or they were out of control. They were rebellious, horrible young ladies. He's lying.
Yeah.
He's a liar.
I mean, I'm sure you had girls like that.
There
but
were some. But overall, your story is actually... That's why your story is so powerful, Jenny. I hope you know that. Your story is very powerful because it represents, I don't know, hundreds? Looking back, I've asked myself...
Hundreds of girls that went before me or after me.
Yes. Because I think I did the math one time, and I'm guesstimating somewhere probably around 500 girls went to Hephzibah House over the years. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, wow.
Is my guesstimate, trying to do the math, but I could be wrong. Could be a little bit less. And I do remember a common theme throughout my growing up as a teenager, where I remember things with girls, is most of the girls had been sexually abused in some way, either raped or molested, in one way or the other. Most of them, not all, but most. And so now, understanding what I understand now as a 45-year-old man, I realized you girls were hurting. You were not a rebel. You were not a horrible person. You needed help because you had been violated. You had been abused. You had been hurt. Most of the homes were broken homes. And there's a lot of background, but all my dad focused on, and he says to this day, that the girls were brought there because they were rebels, they were wicked, they were acting out is a term that gets used. You weren't acting out as a rebel. You were acting out looking for help because you had been, you weren't. Did you ever feel safe as a child?
Safe?
That's a big term. That's a broad question, I know.
At times I did feel safe with my mom and dad, but with my brother, I did not feel safe when he was around. So it's conflicting. It's kind of conflicted, I loved my parents, but they weren't.
1 second, you're breaking up there.
In the end,
there you are.
They weren't able to make me feel. They weren't able to make me feel safe at the end because they ended up. What broke between my father and I was when he left me at Hephzibah House after beating me. Since then, my relationship has never been the same with my father since. It just broke. I didn't trust him anymore.
For what he did?
No, but one time I was at home about in my early 20s, and I was introducing my husband to the family, and a fight broke out between my brother. One of my younger brothers called me a liar and said that it wasn't Jason who did that to me. It was another brother. And this other brother had left the home, changed his ID, changed his name, changed his last name, totally left the family. And I was really close to that brother, actually. We were like best friends growing up. And so I was horrified that my younger brother, who would have been like 4 at the time of the abuse happening, would sit there and say that this other brother was the one that did it, when that was not true and that did not happen. And at that point, I got very upset and I slapped him across the face. And then he punched me in my eye and actually cut my eye with his wedding ring. And then at that point, it got very chaotic, as I think my oldest brother went to go get a gun and was going to go after my husband, or my fiance at the time. And it got really chaotic and people were screaming. We were getting in the car, trying to find the kids and get in the car and take off. And then my oldest brother came running and he was banging on the windows. Right before that happened though, I forgot, but right before that happened, my dad said to me, he said, "I believe you. Run and save yourself," or something along those lines. But he said, "I believe you." And so I ran with my family. That was in my early 20s. I've never looked back. I haven't talked to the family really since, except here and there on maybe Facebook. I talked to a few siblings, but I pretty much cut the whole family out of my life. My kids don't know them, never met them.
You and I's stories are so incredibly similar.
My family was there was a lot of craziness growing up. My brothers would fight and have huge fights. and they would be punching each other and hitting each other. And I remember one time, one of my oldest brother got into a fight with my dad, and he took my dad and threw him down the stairs like a limp doll. And stuff like that happened a lot growing up. It was very scary. And one of my brothers shot one of my younger brothers in the back with a bow and arrow, and he nearly died. And it was just really emotionally an abusive, physically abusive home that I witnessed and saw for myself. Although I wasn't beaten, my brothers were doing a lot of the beating each other up and stuff. It was a very uncontrolled environment that I grew up in.
Wow, Jenny. You're describing, I mean, my brother shot bows and arrows at each other. They shot each other with BB guns. They beat each other.
BB guns, yeah.
It was violence, fist fights every day.
Yeah.
That I just learned something new. I did not know that part. So in other words, you grew up in a very, just like I did, an extremely dangerous, unsafe, violent, dysfunctional home. You were violated by a horrible city. So I was violated by an older sibling. They all deny it. They all tell me I'm lying. I have nothing to do with any of my family anymore. I was raped by one of my older brothers, and they sexually abused me all the time as a younger boy in the bathroom. So it's amazing to me how similar our stories are. I didn't realize they're that similar. And
yeah,
I'm speechless.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about my childhood because in some ways I had very good memories in my childhood. I was very active within horseback riding, and I had a private teacher that taught me everything I know, who I was very close to until the day she died. But so, and I did a lot of activities. I did ballet, I did tap, I did jazz, I did 4-H. I was very involved with the 4-H program.
So could it be safely said that from the externals that people thought this was like a beautiful home?
Yeah. And in some ways I have these wonderful memories of my childhood. But then in another instant, I have horrific memories of my childhood. So it was really confusing and conflicting for me because it seemed like my parents cared about us and that they loved us and wanted the best for us. But then in another instant, I had brothers beating each other up and just craziness going on at the same time, which traumatized me.
Your home, my home, we had parents that literally had no idea how to be a parent.
Yeah.
And there was no, I mean, how could you be a rebel when there was nothing? You weren't a rebel, you were a fighter. You wanted to survive. You wanted to live.
Yeah. I really wanted to go to school. When I got out of Hephzibah House, I was very conflicted when I got out of Hephzibah House. I continued to wear the head covering for a little while, and I continued to try to be like what Hephzibah House had made me over the 15 months prior. But what happened is I came home and all the problems in my home were still there. It was still a very disruptive house. And there were still massive problems going on within the home community. So by going home and going into that environment, I became quickly angry again and realized that I'd been sent away. My family was messed up and they didn't get any help. They sent me away to go get help, or help with quotation air marks around it. Yeah. But they didn't get any help. So I quickly ran away again, and I ran to a youth shelter that had kept me when I was 12. So now I'm 14, And I told them everything that happened to me at Hephzibah House. And then that was when I first revealed and had people saying what happened to you was wrong. That was the first confirmation that I realized what happened in Hephzibah House was not good. That was not a place of anything good. Nothing good came out of that. It was bad. It was a bad place that I had been. And I have people from the world now telling me this. And I quickly realized I was angry at what happened. I was angry at my father for leaving me there for 15 months. I was angry at my mother for being the one that put me in there. And Ron Williams called me a few weeks after I got home to check up on me. And I became angry at that. Like, how dare he? How dare he come back into my world and call me and check up on me when I was treated so inhumanely at Hephzibah House? So I came home and I got really mad one time, and I spray painted my bedroom with peace signs and hippie like, and I spray painted my whole bedroom. And then I had a little pocket knife, and my dad came up and I started blasting my Christian rock as loud as I could blast it. My dad comes in there and he's like, "What are you doing? What, you've destroyed your room." And I'm like, "This is my room. I can do anything I want with it." And he goes, "I'm taking your stereo from you." I held my little pocket knife. I said, "No, you're not. You're not going to take away my stereo." And I had this little, it's like yay big, you know. And that's it. He turned around and walked off. The next thing I know, the police show up at the house. And the police asked me, "Are you going to come willingly, or do we need to handcuff you?" I said, "I'll come willingly. I'd be happy to get out of this house." I was charged with destruction of property, and I forgot what the charge, a simple assault. So I went into a juvenile detention center there, and I knew that my parents were going to send me away again. And I didn't know if they were going to send me back to Hephzibah House or what, but I knew I was going to get sent away again. And I became really scared. So apparently they had plans to send me to a new place called Happiness Hill. And they were preparing to send me to the school. It was like a clone of Hephzibah House. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. But it was another fundamental Baptist whack job school. Who's been since closed down. They've been since closed down. Anyway, I went into court and I told the judge this, and I wrote him a letter. I wrote the judge a letter and said, "My parents are trying to send me to Happiness Hill. This is what happened to me at Hephzibah House." And I wrote it all down. I wrote everything that happened to me at Hephzibah House, from the beating, from hearing kids getting beaten, from the withholding of food, from making people eat until they vomited, which happened to me too. I ate until I vomited one time. And all this stuff I wrote down for the judge. So the judge told my parents they could not send me to Happiness Hill, and he was blocking all orders from me being sent out away again. He blocked my parents from sending me to a future boarding school. And then what really did my parents in was he court ordered me to go to public school. And he knew that it would help me get away from my brother. Right. So at this point, I got to go to public school. I did amazing in public school. I was doing really well. I was in drama and theater. I was in a play. I was a straight A student. The newspapers came and talked with me, and I told my story to Washington Post and to different stories. But a lot of talk show hosts were communicating with my parents, wanting to talk with me, wanting to talk to them. They just couldn't take it. So we went back to court, and my parents told the judge, "If you're going to take away our rights as a parent, then you take her. You take her." And they said, "We don't want anything to do with her." And at that point, I went into the foster care of of Virginia and became a foster child. Um, so I went into foster care, and I went through a few different homes for a while, trying to find a home that wasn't just temporary. Most of the homes for teenage girls are temporary. So it's very hard to find a permanent placement. So I went through a few homes, and I continued going to school and continued doing well in school. They kept me in the same school district, and they kept me in the same county that I lived in. Shortly thereafter, I was finally placed with a permanent foster home with my foster parents, Ann and Lee. I ended up living with them for age 16 to 18, and still close to them to this day. They're considered my parents. I consider them my parents. My foster dad walked me down the aisle.
Aww.
And they're really close to me to this day. They're my parents. That's who I've always considered my parents. And so I have my family and I just don't talk. A couple of siblings have been talking to me recently. I've let them talk to me, and I don't mind reaching out to a few of them, my youngest ones. They weren't really aware of all the stuff that went on with me. And but my oldest brothers, I don't talk to at all. My sister, I don't talk to at all. And my mom's Facebook with me, and she's tried to talk to me. She's tried to apologize to me about being sent to Hephzibah House, but then in the same breath, she'll tell me that it was my dad's fault. So it's like she wants to apologize, but she doesn't want to take full accountability for it. She wants to place the blame on my dad. And she's kind of done that throughout my life.
Do you mind if I interject on that one for a minute?
Yeah.
So back about a year ago, I had described some check-in things on one of my posts, and you commented and tagged your mom. And your mom got on there, and I was appalled by – do you remember that? I was appalled by her behavior. She was blaming you, blaming Dad, wouldn't accept any personal responsibility herself. But then she said something that blew my mind. She said, we couldn't take you out because we signed custody over to my dad.
Yeah, that's what she has told me my whole life.
That's a bold-faced lie.
And she sticks to that story.
That's a bold-faced lie. So parents could come get their daughters at any time legally. And that happened over the years.
Really?
Yes, a couple times it happened where the parents were like, okay, something's wrong, and Dad would be so mad. He would do everything he could to talk them out of it, but they had to do an emergency pull-out, and they would pull the girl out, and then they would just send the stuff back to the parents later because he had to check all the stuff out, all their clothes and personal items and stuff. But it did occur. One girl, the parents had set up a code system. They told her to a code to put in her letter if she ever felt unsafe. And she put the code in her letter, and they came and showed up within days of getting the letter. So about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and they showed up and said, we want our daughter right now, and they took her. So they could have taken you. Dad would use every form of control and manipulation to talk them out of it. But Dad did not own you. Dad, you were not a foster child. You were not a legal custody. He was not a legal custodian of you. I forget how the legal stuff worked, but they could have gotten you at any time. So your mom. Yeah,
the story is that my dad stayed there overnight, just totally distraught over what happened, and that he wanted to get me out, but realized the paperwork he signed, he couldn't get me out. That's the story that's been given to me my whole life.
He might have felt that way, but that's not true. And my dad did have a power. In all fairness, my dad had a powerful control over these parents. He was very manipulative, and he could really get these parents to do whatever he wanted them to do. And he was known for that.
My parents met him at some church that they were visiting, and I guess they were going to this church and he was visiting the church. And my mom said that he just made Hephzibah House sound like somewhere where she would want to go. Just sounded amazing.
I grew up on the road with my dad because I was the child always in trouble. I was just like you. So mom would send me with dad because she couldn't control me. So I went with my dad, and I witnessed my dad talk to hundreds of parents, and he would just have them in the palm of his hand. He had an incredible charisma about him. So that is correct. And he would make it sound
Yeah,
like
he was very charming.
Yep. And he still is. I mean, he's still
my mom thinks he was just an amazing guy and that this place would be perfect for me, so that's what she said, at least. But yeah, so I mean, when I left, Hephzibah House, I was very scared to go back to Hephzibah House, and I often had awful nightmares being taken back there. It's very scary for me. I didn't really feel safe until I was in Anne and Lee's house, where I felt solid and I knew that they were going to keep me permanently.
So think about that. As a young lady, as a child, you never felt safe until you were 16 years of age.
Yeah, that was about the first time I felt safe. When I went into foster care, it was about the first time I felt safe. Even though I was switching homes for a while because they were putting me in temporary homes, and I lived in a youth shelter for a little while, but I still felt safe that I wasn't going to go back to some abusive boarding school, and that I was going to continue going to public school because the judge ordered that. And
do you think getting ordered to go to public school might have saved you?
Yeah, I think that judge, he listened to me, he heard me, and he took a special interest in my case, and he did something that most people wouldn't have done. He court ordered me to go to school, and I'm in the case books now. I mean, judges never do that, so it was a pretty big deal that he did that. And there was a lot of reasons he did that. He knew about the instability in my household. And he knew that about the molestation. And he knew all of these things. And that's why he court ordered me to go to school, to keep me somewhere safe. And I was safe. And I graduated high school and I had the greatest 3 years of high school ever. They were just magical to me. Every bit of it was magical to me. I loved learning. I couldn't wait to go to college, which I did. And I loved learning everything that I could possibly get out of school and higher education that I could get. And one of the things about Hephzibah House, which the other girls they might be like, what? But one of the things that I did like about Hephzibah House was the strict school hours and the fact that you could go through these pace books at a pretty fast rate. And I devoured these pace books at Hephzibah House. I just put myself totally in school and devouring the books. And I personally thought that the education was better than anything I had ever had growing up.
Wow. And see, it's each, because the other girls, or even myself, education was horrible for me because I have difficulty learning. I've now been diagnosed that I have some learning disorders. So I didn't get that education. Those paces overwhelmed me half the time.
Yeah.
You're smart. So you're correct. If you were a smart person that grasped the paces, the AC paces, I did notice that over the years that you would just fly through them and do really well. But that was not all, and that was only onesies, twosies here that went through the school and did really well. The rest of us didn't, because we didn't have anybody to really help us learn. We were just, for me, if I didn't get my stuff done, I was beat. But
downstairs the staff helped with the pace books. If I got stuck, they would help me. And to me, it was amazing getting an education, which is why I fought so hard to go to public school afterwards. because the homeschooling was, non-existent when I was growing up. She did stuff. We did field trips here and there, lots of field trips, but not focused on raw math or English or any of that science or the history.
10-minute warning on our Zoom there. We have 10 minutes left in this second session. Wow, we've covered a lot, and I hate it because we didn't even able to discuss what it was like being in the home. Do you want to do a third session another time later? Because I know we're out of time today. It's up to you. Do you want to do a third session?
Oh no, I'm not out of time. I'm not out of time.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's end this recording. Because Zoom only gives us 40 minutes, and let's start a third session. And as one of you would describe what it was like inside the home after the check-in, would you be willing to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's. I'm gonna stop this recording and start another one.
Okay.